Peters and Chairman Johnson of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee that passed the Senate by unanimous consent at the end of April. Director Krebs of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security recently testified in support of the measure. CISA is the federal agency that is charged with leading the nation's efforts to protect our critical cyber and physical infrastructure. At a May hearing before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, Director Krebs said he thought this bill would, quote, be a useful tool across the federal government, end of quote. President Trump is also supportive of a cyber rotational program. In fact, he directed the establishment of such a program in an executive order he issued this past May, and I applaud him for that. This bill would implement and codify this portion of the President's executive order. If there are clarifications that need to be made to the bill prior to the floor consideration, I'm certain that we will willingly work together with the minority and the administration to address them. I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting the common sense bipartisan bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Heiss.
I'd like to yield some time to the ranking member, Mr. Jordan.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I was going to ask you a question, but you already answered the question before I ask it, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your willingness to work with this. We got this report coming out the 7th. We're not going to object to the bill, and I think it was going to sail right through. But depending on what the report may say, and this sort of distinction between does it go OPM or DHS, if you're willing to work with us when we get the report, that's all great, and let's pass the legislation.
The gentleman yield.
Yep, sure.
We're certainly willing to work with you. I just think it's so important if we can, I mean, with the shortage of cybersecurity experts that we have now, and with the government needing cybersecurity expertise, I just think this is a very more effective and efficient way to work with our various agencies to make sure that they have what they need.
Yep, you bet. All right. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on reporting S-406 favorably to the House. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed shall signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it, and S-406 is reported favorably to the House. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. Now, pursuant to notice, I call up H.R. 3889, the ONDCP Technical Corrections Act. The clerk will report the bill, which was distributed in advance.
H.R. 3889 to amend the Office of National Drug Control Policy Reauthorization Act of 1998 to make technical corrections.
Without objection, the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any time. I will recognize the sponsor of the bill, Mr. Ruda of California, to speak on his legislation. I commend Mr. Ruda for taking the leadership on this issue, and I yield them 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am proud to support this bipartisan legislation that will make technical changes to provisions reauthorizing the Office of National Drug Control Policy included in last year's SUPPORT Act. This year, Americans will lose close to 70,000 family members, loved ones, and friends due to a drug overdose. More Americans are now dying annually due to an overdose than at the height of the AIDS crisis or during the entire Vietnam War. No community is unaffected by this crisis. In my home of Orange County, California, drug and alcohol overdose deaths have increased by 82% since 2000. Across our country, our constituents are asking us to advance solutions to address this epidemic. Last year, Congress passed and President Trump enacted the Support for Patients and Communities Act, a wide-ranging bipartisan bill aimed at addressing treatment, prevention, recovery, and enforcement. And the Support Act represents an important step in the right direction to help reverse the tide of overdose deaths. The Support Act included provisions to reauthorize and reform the Office of National Drug Control Policy, a component of the Executive Office of the President. ONDCP plays a critical role in overseeing the federal government's drug control efforts. However, there were several technical issues in the Support Act that must be fixed to ensure that ONDCP can properly carry out these provisions as Congress intended and improve the federal government's response to this crisis. The ONDCP Technical Corrections Act of 2019 will support the integrity of the performance measurement system, help ONDCP hire the best people to address the addiction crisis, and improve the effectiveness of grant programs. I would like to thank the committee staff on both sides of the aisle for working diligently to develop and advance this bill, as well as Congressman Meadows for joining me as the co-lead of this legislation. While I look forward to this committee passing this bill today, there's still much more to be done to address the addiction crisis. I look forward to working with all of my colleagues on this important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. We now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill makes technical amendments to a law that was passed last Congress to reauthorize this office. Last year, we moved quickly to reauthorize ONDCP to reinvigorate the office and give the administration additional authorities to address the opioid crisis, a crisis that is not a partisan issue, and this committee has done good bipartisan work to reinvigorate the office. President Trump appointed Director Carroll to lead this office. We have heard from him twice this year about the work the administration is doing to combat the opioid crisis. I hope this bill helps to further support this goal. I want to stand with the subcommittee chairman and the ranking member Meadows and the chairman. A revitalized office that is implementing important and timely changes to address the opioid crisis and other issues is important, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Ruder and Representative Meadows, for their collaboration and leadership on the ONDCP Technical Corrections Act of 2019. This act resolves technical issues in the Office of National Drug Control Policy Authorization Act that became law last year. It would ensure effective hiring of critical leadership positions, increase efficiency in performance reporting, and maintain the integrity of grant programs as originally intended in that bill. We are in the midst of a substance use epidemic that claimed 70,000 lives in 2017 alone. It is critical that ONDCP can operate as effectively and as efficiently as possible to combat this crisis and ensure the health and the safety of our citizens. I continue to appreciate the bipartisan support of you, Mr. Chairman, and our entire committee, and for the Office of National Drug Control Policy that has been working very closely with us. And so with that, I would urge members to vote in favor of the bill. Is there anybody else that wants to be recognized? Very well. There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on reporting H.R. 3889 favorably to the House. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed shall signify by saying no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes appear to have it. The ayes have it. And S 406 is reported favorably to the House. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes.
That was, I'm sorry, 3889. It was 3889.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
3889.
Is reported favorably to the House. Okay. On this, you can just read the numbers, and there's one part where you have to read the amendment.
Now pursuant to notice, I call up the following postal naming bills which were distributed in advance. H.R. 887, H.R. 1252, H.R. 1253, H.R. 1972, H.R. 2151, H.R. 3207 with an amendment, H.R. 3314, H.R. 3329. Without objection, the bills are considered read. If any member would like to speak briefly on any of these items in the package, I will recognize you now. Hearing no further discussion.
So wait, Mr. Grothman.
Mr. Grothman?
Yeah, I've said before, I think we should restrict honoring post offices. We have so many military heroes in this country, and particularly when you see members of the popular culture, which has probably overall had a negative influence on this country over the last 60 years. I guess when you record the vote, I'd like to be voted no on the non-military names.
Let me just say this. We have so many heroes and sheroes in our country, and I actually applaud members who want to recognize people for what they did. So often we come upon this earth and then we're forgotten. People do great things and then they're forgotten. And I would urge all of us to support all of these postal naming bills. Hearing no further discussion on these bills, I would request unanimous consent for, well, we can't have unanimous consent. We're going to call the,
Yeas and nays. I asked these to be considered on block.
okay.
He'll object.
Without objection, what we'll do is we will call the vote on block, and we'll take the yeas and nays. All those in favor of these postal naming bills, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. It appears that the ayes have it. I'm assuming, is there a request for a roll call? There being none, the ayes have it, and we will report them to the House.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
You got it.
Mr. Roy.
Yes, Mr. President.
I just would like to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Grothman with respect to the concern, not a blanket statement. I agree with you about recognizing individuals and their lives and what they've done, but I do agree with Mr. Grothman about the focus on those who have served in our military and some concern that we get a little loose sometimes with who are naming post offices. So I associate myself with his remarks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. All right. Now, pursuant to notice, I call up a resolution relating to the investigation of the use of non-official electronic messaging accounts by non-career officials at the White House. The clerk will report the resolution, which was distributed in advance.
A resolution offered by Mr. Cummings of Maryland authorizing issuance of subpoena related to non-official electronic messaging accounts.
Without objection, the resolution is considered read and open to amendment at any point. The chair recognizes himself to offer an amendment in the nature of a substitute. Copies of the amendment have already been distributed and are on the dais. The clerk will report.
An amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Mr. Cummings of Maryland.
Without objection, the amendment is considered read and will serve as the base text for purposes of amendment. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Today, we are considering a resolution to authorize me as chairman to subpoena records relating to the use of private email and texting accounts by the White House employees in violation of the Presidential Records Act. The Presidential Records Act was enacted in the aftermath of the Watergate scandal. And I want to remind all members, it is the law. It's the law. It makes clear that White House records belong to the public, not the President. The law requires that the President and senior advisors to the President preserve the official records of the White House. The law prohibits federal employees from using non-official email accounts for official business unless the employees copy their official account or forward copies to their official accounts within 20 days. Again, I emphasize, it is the law. For years, our committee has been responsible for updating and enhancing these laws and for conducting oversight on compliance with them. We have done that during the Republican and Democratic administrations alike. In this case, it has become clear that the committee needs to examine the use of personal email and other text message accounts by this White House carefully, because the committee has already received evidence of multiple senior officials using their personal accounts to conduct official business. For example, Jared Kushner's attorney confirmed to the committee that he uses the messaging application WhatsApp to communicate with foreign individuals. Ivanka Trump's attorney admitted that she receives emails about official business to her personal email account and does not forward them to her official account within 20 days as required by law. According to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, Steve Bannon admitted that he, and I quote, regularly used his personal BlackBerry and personal email for work-related communications and took no steps to preserve these work communications, end of quote. That is an admitted violation of federal law, an admitted violation of federal law. And this was not a low-level employee. This was one of the President's closest advisors. This investigation began as a bipartisan one. Listen up, listen to this carefully, members. In March 2017, Chairman Jason Chaffetz requested information about whether officials in the White House were using personal email accounts in violation of the Presidential Records Act. In September 2017, Chairman Trey Gowdy renewed the committee's request and requested new information about the identities of individuals who have used private email accounts or text messages and other phone-based messaging applications to conduct official business. In response, the White House gave us only a couple of pages of policy documents, a commitment to conducting an internal review, and a promise to follow up with us when their internal review was concluded. To date, the White House has never given us the results of their internal review and has never given us another document. On December 19, 2018, after I was selected as chairman, I sent a letter to the White House requesting that they produce all of the documents requested by the committee in this bipartisan investigation under Chairman Chaffetz and under Chairman Gowdy. We have received nothing. Since my selection as chairman, the White House has refused to produce even a single document in response to the committee's request. As a result, on July 1, 2019, I sent a letter explaining that in light of the White House's complete refusal to provide any documents whatsoever, the committee is now seeking copies of all emails or texts sent or received in violation of federal law and the White House's own policy. We need these documents to understand why the White House officials are violating the Presidential Records Act, why they are attempting to keep certain communications out of the official record system, and whether sensitive information is being properly protected, and whether legislative changes should be made to prevent similar violations in the future. There is significant precedent for this investigation. In 2007, this committee investigated violation of the Presidential Records Act by officials in the Bush administration. The committee's investigation revealed that senior White House officials conducted official business using email accounts maintained by the Republican National Committee. During that investigation, the committee reviewed more than 20,000 pages of emails and other documents. Just a few years ago, President Trump and many Republicans demanded that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton provide thousands of her emails to Congress as part of the Benghazi investigation, which I'm very familiar since I was a ranking member on that select committee. Representative Gowdy, then the chairman of the Benghazi Select Committee, demanded copies of all emails relating to Benghazi sent or received by Secretary Clinton using her personal email account. We received those documents, and I called for them to be made public. Our approach today should not be different merely because President Trump is the president. The resolution before us authorizes subpoenas for documents that were not preserved properly and that violated the law. And I remind members of the committee, these seats will be occupied by other people in the future. Come here 20, 25 years ago, it's quite possible that few of us will still be on this committee or be here. And so what we have to do is make sure that the Presidential Records Act is enforced and that we preserve records for not only ourselves and for the public, but for generations yet unborn. And so I urge the committee to support this resolution, and with that, I yield to our ranking member, Mr. Jordan.
Yesterday, right next door in Judiciary, the Democrats had Bob Mueller testify. They were hoping his testimony would help their crazy impeachment plans. Instead, it was a total bust. No new information. The Democrats are no closer to their goal of impeaching the president. In fact, I think they're farther away. Thank goodness for that. But they don't waste any time. They don't waste any time. Now they're going to go after the emails of the first family in an attempt to create an appearance of some type of controversy. You won't hear them say it, but their real goal is to go fishing through the personal and private emails of Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. The issuance of this subpoena is purely for politics. Chairman Cummings first asked the White House to produce the private emails of senior White House officials on July 1st, 2019, 3 weeks ago. The White House and Abbe Lowell, the attorney for Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, are cooperating with the request from the chairman. In fact, Mr. Lowell has briefed the committee twice, but Chairman Cummings is rushing to subpoena now for the headlines before the August recess and again choosing confrontation over cooperation. Here are the facts. Here are the facts. Jared Kushner's attorney has told us that he has preserved all records as required by law and does not use personal email or other platforms to conduct official business. Following the law. Imagine that. Ivanka Trump inadvertently used unofficial email for official business on a few rare occasions, but she corrected her actions exactly as the law directs and provided every single one of those emails to the White House for preservation. Furthermore, contrary to Chairman Cummings' assertion, her attorney has explained that Ms. Trump forwards all emails relating to official business to her official White House account. Again, as you are supposed to do according to the law. But despite this, the chairman is requesting all of her emails. I mean, think about this. He referenced the Clinton administration. Think about what Secretary Clinton did. Clinton exclusively used private servers. Clinton sent and received classified information over those private servers, and she destroyed 30,000 emails. I was on the same committee that the chairman talked about. I was on the Benghazi committee. I asked Secretary Clinton when she testified, I said, hey, how about this? You got 60,000 emails. For years, you've only used business, only done it on your personal private server. You got 60,000 emails. How about this? How about letting someone like a retired federal judge, a neutral third party, examine those emails and determine which ones we should be able to see to figure out what happened in this tragedy in Benghazi? And she said, nope, not going to do that. We're going to let Cheryl Mills, David Kendall and Heather Samuelson, her attorneys, figure out which ones. So that comparison doesn't even, not even the same thing. I can't think of a single reason for this request this broad aside from wanting to pursue the emails of the president's daughter and son-in-law. This subpoena is completely inappropriate and frankly an abuse of the committee's authority, and I'd urge my colleagues to vote no. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. As we move to Mr. Raskin, I remind all of our members that this is the law. Mr. Raskin.
It is indeed the law, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, the Judiciary Committee did hear from Special Counsel Mueller, a lifelong Republican and a decorated Vietnam War hero, who came to testify about, among other things, the 10 episodes of presidential obstruction of justice detailed in his voluminous 448-page report delivered about the sweeping and systematic Russian attack on the American presidential election. I'm not quite sure how that somehow is a counter to the purpose of this resolution. This committee has received evidence that multiple officials in the Trump White House may have violated the Presidential Records Act, which I would think would be something of unanimous interest to this committee. All of us should be invested in the Article 2 branch compliance with the Presidential Records Act. The President's core job is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, including maintaining a record of everything that's taking place in the presidency. The personal counsel for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump confirmed to the committee that Jared Kushner, who serves as a senior advisor to the president, used the messaging application WhatsApp to communicate with foreign leaders. The committee was told Mr. Kushner took screenshots of those communications and forwards them to his official White House email account or to the National Security Council. The personal counsel for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump confirmed in the committee that Ivanka Trump continues to receive emails relating to official business on her personal email account, and that she does not forward those emails to her official account unless she responds to the email. So that's out of compliance, at least to my understanding of it, Mr. Chairman. I thought that that was the whole basis of the hullabaloo about Hillary Clinton, that she was using her personal email account. Well, that's precisely what it sounds like Ivanka Trump is doing without making the proper records. The report issued by Special Counsel Robert Mueller stated that Steve Bannon admitted that he used a personal BlackBerry for his work in the White House and took no steps at all to preserve his communications. Now, is that something that's of concern to us in Congress or not? The committee obtained a document that appears to show that K.T. McFarland, while serving as Deputy National Security Advisor, conducted official business on her personal AOL.com account. We need to support this resolution so the committee can investigate why these individuals violated the law, whether others have violated the law, and how to prevent this outrageous disregard for the rule of law in the future. I think this is something, Mr. Chairman, that drives the American people crazy, the idea that, well, if our side does it, it's perfectly okay. If your side does it, then we're going to have a huge campaign around it, and we're going to attack it. I think we should have one yardstick, one rule here, and we need to stand by the Presidential Records Act. We are the lawmaking branch of government under Article 1. We are charged with the powers of the people to make laws, and it is the job of the president to take care the laws are faithfully executed. We need to have an official record of what it is that the president is doing, and we can't have people flouting it and running outside of it. And
Would my friend yield for a question?
I'm delighted to yield to my friend from Virginia.
I wonder, would it surprise my friend from Maryland to learn that just a few years ago in this very committee, the distinguished ranking member, Mr. Jordan, actually emphatically stated that subpoenas were the primary tool for this committee and for Congress to be able to get at necessary information to do its work, without which frankly, would be defenestrated. And that, and in advocating passionately for the issuance of subpoenas so that we can compel cooperation in the issuance of documents and witnesses. Would that surprise my friend, given what we just heard?
I wasn't here then, but it would not surprise me that our friend Mr. Jordan was a very effective champion of legislative oversight in the use of the subpoena power in order to get the information that Congress needs. And I think that Congress should be doing that regardless of who the president is.
If my friend would further yield, is my friend saying we ought to be consistent in our views about the importance of subpoenas irrespective of the topic at hand?
Look, I understand that partisanship is built into our system in some sense, as the founders thought it's built into human nature, but I think all of us have to struggle to be as consistent as we can be in terms of conducting the oversight that the American people want us to do. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I happily yield back.
Mr. Jordan.
Well, I would just point out, did Ivanka Trump set up an unofficial server in her home exclusively to conduct all official business on?
My friend asking a question of me?
Both you and the gentleman from Maryland were
You know,
talking about this issue. I'm just asking, did she do that? Because I know someone who did.
Well, Mr. Jordan, I mean, every lawbreaker
You know why
and every
she did
rule
it? You
breaker
know why-
has
and you
his
know
or
why-
her own MO.
And you know,
Wait a minute, hold on. Wait a minute.
I'll let him finish.
You know, one at a time. I want us to go back to regular order, and if you're gonna yield to the gentleman back and forth, so that we can keep some order.
They referenced me multiple times, so I thought I'd ask them a question since they
Yeah,
asked
but
me
what I'm saying is,
several questions.
I'm allowing you to do that. I just want one person to speak at a time. That's all.
Did Ivanka Trump set up an unofficial server exclusively at her home to conduct official business on?
As far as I know, she did not. Everybody breaks rules
No,
in
she
their
did
own
not.
way.
No, she
Yeah.
did not. But you know who did? And for the express purpose of evading the records law, the person who did that was Secretary Clinton. Ms. Trump had a few emails when she first started working at the White House, and once she discovered what the law says, she gave those over and kept those records, plain and simple, every single one. And her lawyer told that to this committee when he came in and talked to us. So this is completely different, and yet you guys want to make it the same. Although I do remember you all defending Clinton when she had 60,000 emails on a private server and sent classified information and received classified information on that server. And oh, by the way, she got to decide which ones we were going to get to see. She didn't turn them all over like Ms. Trump has done.
Would the gentleman
She didn't
yield?
turn them all over like Mr. Kushner has done.
Would the gentleman yield?
And in just a second, she didn't do that. In fact, what did she do? She destroyed 30,000. So this is completely different. But we know how the votes are going to go. We know what you guys are going to do here.
Would my friend yield?
Sure.
I would just simply say, if my friend believes what he just said, and if he's accurate, then he has nothing to fear by the issuance of these subpoenas.
Well, but these subpoenas are for all kinds of things. It's much broader than official records. You want all kinds of personal things, too. That's the problem. This is scary. When this is going to be the standard, when this is going to be the standard, this is scary. You want personal information from people. That is scary. If it's official record, you get the official record, sure. But that's not what this subpoena is about. Who was asking? I'm sorry, who was asking? Yes, the gentleman. I'd be happy.
Thank you so much. This is pretty unprecedented that we are trying to protect family members right now of this administration. These are people that have access, but our ranking member needs to understand.
I'll let you finish. Hold on one second.
But it's
no, what's
pretty-
unprecedented is the
It is.
fact
It's
that this
unprecedented.
committee
We're
is.
talking about the daughter of the president who has access to
excuse me.
information.
Mr. Salib, he has the time, I assume.
And I'm going to let her back. I just want to say what's unprecedented is the nature of this subpoena and the personal information it's going after.
Let him finish, and then he'll yield to you, all right?
I yield.
Oh, you're yielding now? All right, Ms. Salib.
I think it's really important for my colleagues to understand that we're talking about transparency and talking about oversight. These are messages that impact the American people. That right now, all I hear is this fear from the other side of information that might come about Ivanka, and we got to protect that's all I hear is that you're choosing to protect family members of this current administration that have access to information. They are at the table making decisions on behalf of the American people.
Reclaiming my
They don't
time.
have any privacy anymore. They also have
What?
to be accountable to us in this chamber. And Mr. Chairman and Ranking
What?
Member, I understand that you want to talk about the specific processes and we want to go back and forth about Hillary Clinton and
I'm gonna
but,
reclaim-
but,
let me
understand
reclaim my
that you are
time.
protecting someone that is at the table now
This
that has clearances.
this subpoena is for personal emails, who their domestic help is, who's watching their, that's ridiculous. That is completely
Mr.
off the table.
Ranking-
Mr. Chairman,
Would you please, just one last point, Ranking Member,
Okay.
please, just 30 seconds. It stopped becoming personal when they got access into the room. It stopped becoming personal when they got security clearances. It stopped becoming personal when they're in the room making decisions that impact the American people. And
Okay.
they also are sitting at the Trump Organization businesses table as well, making decisions. Remember that. Fear that. Because no matter if there's an R or D next to our name, fear the fact that we have corporations, people sitting
Mr.
at
Chairman,
the
I want to
table.
reclaim my time.
you reclaim it,
Yeah,
go.
I'm reclaiming my time. This is, again,
23 seconds.
so different than what happened with Secretary Clinton, and any type of comparison is just not in order at all. Obviously, I'm against the subpoena. With that, I would yield back.
Thank you very much. Let me remind everybody that this is about the official records. This is not about personal records. These are records that the law requires. Let me finish. Requires that be recorded in a certain way. So I don't want to make sure we're clear on that.
Mr. Chairman, would you yield for a question?
Yes.
Because to the point you're making, I'm reading a resolution that isn't the one described by Mr. Jordan. Because, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this resolution for subpoenas says three things. We're seeking all presidential records sent or received by non-career officials of the White House using non-official electronic messaging.
Right.
Secondly, we're looking at all communications sent or received by White House employees, including employees in the National Security Council.
Yes.
And thirdly, all documents referring to or related to reports, allegations, or evidence of misuse of information technology systems by non-career officials at the White House. Is that correct?
That is absolutely incredibly
So it's
correct.
not some overly broad fishing
No.
expedition. It's quite specific.
Yeah.
I thank the chair.
The other thing that I want...
I would just, Mr. Chairman?
Wait a minute, man. I gave you an extra 10 minutes.
No, you didn't. I didn't. I used my
Yes, I
5
did.
minutes like you're allowed.
Let
I
me,
yielded a bunch of it to three different members on your side. I just want to point to number 2. All communications. Doesn't say official communication, it says all communications. That's what your subpoena says.
let me say this. It says, all communications sent or received by White House employees, including employees in the National Security Council, from January 21st, 2017 to the present about whether messages sent or received by non-career officials through non-official electronic messaging accounts, including text messages, phone-based message applications, or encryption software, were classified or may contain classified information. Ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, would Chairman yield?
Yeah.
You made my point. There is no qualifier. It says all communications. That includes personal, too. If it said all communications consistent with the Presidential Records Act, that's one thing. That's not what it says. It says all communications. That is our concern.
Let me say that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
at the appropriate time, I'd like to move to strike the last word.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm sitting here thinking about this and the opposition that has cropped up on the other side of the aisle, like I do when I have one of my children who comes to me and complains to me, but Mom, what I did wasn't as bad as what she did. And I say to them, you broke a rule. There are consequences to breaking rules, and when I am exploring what those consequences might need to be, I need to know what you did, and it has nothing to do with what someone else may or may not have done in our family. But consequences are going to result after I have an opportunity as their mom to take a look closely at whether they broke a rule. What our colleagues on the other side of the aisle seem to be suggesting is that, but Mr. Chairman, what some other person did is worse than what we think the White House employees working there now might have done. So since it's not as bad as we think the other person's was, we don't want to do anything. Well, what is the point of having rules? There is a law that the White House employees have to comply with. We have credible information to lead us to believe that the current White House employees have broken the rules in use of personal devices and or use of personal email and not making sure that those records are preserved. We are the United States House of Representatives, a co-equal branch of government. This is the Oversight Committee of the United States House of Representatives, and it is our job to investigate to make sure that those records are preserved and that the rules aren't broken, no matter who breaks them. And when it was a different accusation, the Republicans were all over it, creating a select committee even to get to the bottom of what their accusations were. And now, because it's their people, and they think it maybe wasn't as bad as the people that they wanted to go after and punish, then, oh, we should just dismiss this and sweep it all under the rug, and it doesn't matter whether these records are preserved. That's called hypocrisy. And inconsistency, I wouldn't allow it with my own children. I taught them better, so that when they grow up and become adults, they know how to conduct themselves properly and follow the rules. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Before we go to Mr. Heiss, I want us to all keep in mind that this is a subpoena to John Michael Mick Mulvaney, the acting White House Chief of Staff, for official records. Now, Mr. Heiss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we're going to talk hypocrisy, if we're going to talk that rules matter, then we need to look no further than what happened on the House floor last week when the House rules were outrightly violated, and then the Democrats came up and changed the rules. So if we're going to talk about rules, okay, let's talk about them. The hypocrisy in here is pretty stunning. But the subpoenas here, look, this committee's already asked for financial records, already asked for business records. This is going far beyond the scope of official records. This is getting into nothing but an attempt to go after the family of the president in an attempt to further go after the president himself. And it's as obvious as it can be. And with that, the gentleman from Ohio, I'll yield to him.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Just a couple points. The gentlelady from Florida talked about the Clinton example and this example. I didn't bring up Secretary Clinton. The chairman did. That's what I was responding to. He brought up Secretary Clinton in the issue when he was on the Benghazi committee. I served on that committee too. So I didn't make that comparison. He did. I was just showing the big difference between the two. Second, the chairman.
Will the gentleman yield?
Hang on one second. Second point, the chairman just mentioned that the subpoenas to Mick Mulvaney, to the White House Chief of Staff. But I don't remember the chairman talking about Mick Mulvaney in his opening statement. He mentioned two names in the opening statement. He mentioned Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. So we all know what this is about. I didn't bring up the Clinton comparison. You all did. I'm just setting the record straight on the idea that she destroyed 30,000 emails.
Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Sure.
So what my friend raised as it relates to the Clinton emails and the 30,000 email reference that you made was a result of our chairman pointing out that you have inconsistently supported subpoenas of information depending on whose side of the aisle broke the rules. And that we had previous bipartisan support from Mr. Chaffetz, from previous chairman of this committee, no matter who broke the rules. And now—
Reclaiming my time, that's why I pointed out, that's why I asked the question 10, 15 minutes ago to Mr. Raskin and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, did Ivanka Trump set up an exclusive private server, sent and received all her
would the
emails?
gentleman
from
yield?
all- You don't get to reclaim my time.
I'm not trying to reclaim it. I'm asking you to yield.
No, I'm not right now. She didn't do anything even remotely close to what she did. And oh, when it was discovered that there were some emails that she hadn't properly preserved, what did she do? Preserved them. What did Secretary Clinton do? She destroyed them. That is a big difference. Their lawyer met with the committee. Their lawyer said they have complied with everything. Once she knew that, oh, by the way, there's a few emails I didn't comply with the record, she complied. Big difference from that behavior and the behavior of Secretary Clinton. I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
And I would just add to that, and I thank the gentleman, that the content of these emails is not necessary to determine whether or not there was compliance to the Presidential Record Act. We don't need to get into the details of this other than for the purpose of going after the president's family, and that's totally inappropriate. I yield back.
Mr. Clay. Mr. Clay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard you. You know, we should all be alarmed, all of us, when the Presidential Records Act is ignored by a White House with total disregard for the law. We should be concerned. According to media reports from Politico and the New York Times, senior advisor to the president, Jared Kushner, created a new private email account in the months before he joined the government. Politico reported that Kushner used his personal email account to communicate with senior White House officials and others outside of the government about official White House business. In response to these reports on September 25th, 2017, Congressman Cummings asked Mr. Kushner to provide information about the security of the private email account and the names of the individuals Mr. Kushner communicated with about official business on his personal account. Mr. Kushner never responded to the letter. Instead, the White House directed us to the personal attorney for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. That attorney confirmed that Mr. Kushner uses messaging applications, including for communications with foreign individuals. Now, did you hear that? With foreign individuals. Now, we spent the entire day yesterday listening to Special Prosecutor Mueller highlighting the threat that the Russian government posed to the 2016 and subsequent elections, and we have a senior advisor to the president communicating with foreign governments. You should be alarmed. You should be concerned. You know, Mr. Kushner's attorney could not answer whether Mr. Kushner's communications included classified information, which would be a major national security breach. And for the other side to not be concerned about that, it's kind of like selective memory loss, or what's going on? I would be concerned about this national security of this government and our elections. And you're going to let the president's son-in-law just willy-nilly put us in jeopardy? What's going on? You know, on July 1st, 2019, the committee requested documents relating to reports, allegations, or evidence of misuse of information technology systems by political appointees in the White House. Guess what? The White House has not provided an answer to that letter. You know, Mr. Chairman, we pass laws like the Presidential Records Act to protect this government and to protect this nation, and it looks like Well, it is just a total disregard for the law by this administration. And I will yield to my friend from Virginia.
I just have a question for my friend. Assertions have been made here about violations of the law about a different case in the previous administration. Is it my friend's recollection that, as a matter of fact, that was investigated thoroughly by the FBI and no violation of law was in fact found?
That is correct.
And the FBI director even had a press conference to assert that?
Yes.
I
he
thank
did.
my friend.
And I thank my friend.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, I do yield.
It seems like there are a bunch of young people here today, students, so I want to just recreate the conversation between Mr. Jordan and some of our colleagues on this side of the aisle. I think the claims and counterclaims of hypocrisy miss the point. There was a logical fallacy in what Mr. Jordan said. It's called the two-cloak fallacy. It's when you answer an argument by making criticism of a third party. So we made an argument about how the law is being violated, and Mr. Jordan said, in an irrelevant distraction from the argument, but look at what happened several years ago. And so I think that the students can recognize that as a logical fallacy, and we can see through the move that he made. It was clever and seductive, but it was wrong.
Perhaps all of us need to
It was
attend one
appropriate,
of your
Professor.
classes. Perhaps we should go to one of his classes, Mr. Jordan. I yield back.
There being no further discussion on
Mr. Chairman,
amendments.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, over here.
Mr. Gibbs.
You know, I'm here, sitting here listening to this, I think I'm living in a parallel universe. I seem to remember there was a Secretary of State a few years ago that had her own private server, and think about this. She's Secretary of State. Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, those people in those positions are going to see classified information on a daily basis. And she was using that server as her primary email account, so she was either receiving and email classified information, or she wasn't doing her job. You can't have it both ways. And my understanding, I was on this committee, but my understanding, back when that all was going on, and we tried, this committee tried to get, get a solution to rectify that and get the answers. The other side of the aisle was opposed to that. And when clearly, we all knew that she had her own private server, and clearly a violation of many laws, and so I think, it's just the hypocrisy here is just unbelievable, and it's really just about politics. It's pretty clear, and I think it was stated earlier by the ranking member that the request for some of this information to the administration was just done here in less than 30 days ago, and I think this is playing politics before we go on the August recess to try to move this ahead, especially after what happened yesterday. So I would yield the rest of my time to the ranking member if he wants it.
Well, I thank the gentleman for yielding. I guess I would just say to the professor from Maryland, again, I didn't bring up Clinton. Chairman did. He was making the comparison. I just want to point out the truth. Ivanka Trump is complying with the law. Hillary Clinton never did. Never did. Even at the end, even when she got caught, she used bleach bit to destroy things. I remember that press conference, too. I remember Jim Comey saying she did all these things wrong, but oh, by the way, we're not going to charge her. I remember that press conference that Mr. Connolly just referenced. I remember all that. But I didn't bring her up today.
Would the gentleman yield?
I didn't bring her up. The
Gentleman
chairman of the
yield.
committee brought up the comparison to Clinton. I'm just pointing out the big differences.
Would the gentleman yield?
Ivanka Trump is complying with the law. Hillary Clinton never did. When it was brought to Ivanka Trump's attention, she said, sure. She turned over whatever was on her personal device. She turned that over to the presidential records, complying with the law. That's been clear. Their lawyer had told this committee that. Just 3 weeks ago, the chairman asked for some more information, and now he's moving right to a subpoena. You guys brought up the comparison. I didn't. If we're going to have the comparison, let's talk about the facts. No one at the White House is using bleach bit. I haven't seen that. No one in the White House is destroying 30,000 emails. I haven't seen that. But you guys aren't going to stop. You're just going to keep going after.
Oh, my God.
Would the gentleman yield?
Keep going after. What do you say?
Okay, would the gentleman yield for a question? Or-
Yell.
Jerry?
Yeah. Well,
Wait. Am I yielding to Conley or Raskin? Who am I yielding to?
I've got a quick.
No, I was just invoking the Almighty, Mr. Jordan.
Well, it is, I mean, when you
Well,
look at the
would you-
comparison,
would you
I would say, oh
concede-
my goodness, too.
Would you concede that even if everything that you said about the past were completely
No,
true?
no, there's no conceding
would-
that it was the truth. That is the truth. What
Well,
I said about
I-
Secretary Clinton is the
I
truth.
understand in your mind
You're
it
the
is,
guys
but-
making stuff up
Okay.
about Miss Trump.
Okay.
I'm telling you the truth about
Would you
Miss
concede
Clinton.
that even if we all accept that what you say is true, but hypothetically, that it would have no logical bearing?
I'm not going to even concede. Look, it's
Would you
the
concede
truth.
it would have no logical bearing?
It's the truth.
Hold up. One at a time.
All right, I'm yielding now to the professor from Maryland who was giving a lecture earlier. So the professor, I'm yielding to the professor.
I just want to point out that even if the arguments made by the distinguished gentleman from Ohio were all true, it would have no logical bearing at all upon the facts of what the resolution deals with, which is, as I understand it, the personal counsel for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump confirmed to this committee that Ivanka Trump continues to receive emails relating to official business on her personal email account, and she does not forward
That is
them
not accurate.
to her official account. unless she
Reclaiming my
responds
time.
to-
Reclaim my time. 2 points. First, that is not accurate. Second, I didn't bring this all up, this comparison. You guys did. I just want to set the record straight. You're the ones who wanted to talk about Clinton. And if you want to bring her up, I'm happy to point out the big differences between Secretary Clinton and Ivanka Trump. I yield back to the distinguished gentleman from Ohio.
I would just say that the hypocrisy here is it just smells so bad, it's just ridiculous, and we need to move on. We need to move on and do what's right for this country and get off all this stuff
Mr.
going on.
Sarbanes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I just wanted to take us back to the original premise for the Presidential Records Act, following up on something that my colleague sent earlier. When you are elected by the people of this country to occupy an official position, it stops being about you and it starts being about us. And the Presidential Records Act is basically saying once you step into a position of public trust, i.e. serving as an employee in the White House, you then, in a volunteer capacity in this instance, but carrying out official business, you're not acting on behalf of yourself anymore. You're acting on behalf of everybody who's assembled in this room. It's your government, it's your presidency, it's your office, and everybody who works in that administration is working for you. And it's you that want these records. We're not issuing these subpoenas for ourselves. We're a committee of Congress elected by the people to exercise oversight with respect to official business that is conducted in the White House. That's our job. So I just want to remind us that when we are issuing these subpoenas, we are trying to carry out our duty that has been given to us by the public. We are carrying these subpoenas and these requests for documents and information on behalf of people who elected us to come here and make sure that the business that is conducted by the President and in the White House is business that is for your benefit and not theirs.
Would the gentleman
That's the premise for this. And I yield
Would
back.
the gentleman yield to me?
Yeah, I'll yield to the...
Thank you, the Chairman. On December 19, 2018, former Chairman Trey Gowdy, remember him? And I met with Mr. Lowell along with the committee staff. The White House directed us to meet with Mr. Lowell after I requested information about Mr. Kushner's reported use of WhatsApp to communicate with foreign officials. During our meeting, Mr. Lowell confirmed to me that Jared Kushner, his client, uses messaging applications to conduct official business. Mr. Lowell told us that Mr. Kushner preserves records of his messages by taking screenshots of his conversations and then forwarding them to his official account. 3 months later, after I disclosed our conversation in a letter to the White House, Mr. Lowell claimed that my letter was, quote, not completely accurate about what was said. I was at the meeting and I know what I heard. But this committee should not have to rely on me or Mr. Lowell to answer questions about Kushner's issues of messaging applications to conduct official business. We're not trying to get the personal records. Mr. Lowell himself stated in his letter, and I quote, "If there was a question about Jared's use of WhatsApp, that is a question for the White House counsel, not me. That is why I have repeatedly requested information from the White House about this issue over the past 2 years. There are serious questions about this White House's use of personal email and text accounts, and we must issue these subpoenas to get our answers." And I want to associate myself with my distinguished colleague from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes. I mean, we act like we are, and I said this early on, we act like we're just legislating for the day. We're legislation for generations yet unborn. So, and by the way, this is the law. Come on now. This is the law. We make the laws. And damn it, if we're not going to, excuse me, because I know that'll be on the front page somewhere.
We heard that.
Yeah, I strike my word, that word. But all I'm saying is that if we are going to preserve our records, we need to preserve them consistently. And with
Mr.
that,
Chairman, will you yield for a question?
I'm out of time.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Roy.
I think the chairman, it would strike me as important for us to figure out what on earth we're trying to find. Are we trying to find that Ivanka Trump somehow is engaged in a conspiracy to cover up emails relating to the death of an ambassador in Libya? Are we trying to dive into emails that are dealing with dead Americans in Libya? Because we know that's what kicked off the issue with respect to the email controversy regarding the former Secretary of State. And that was what was being discussed. So my question here is, when we've got Ms. Trump acknowledging through her attorney in discussions with this committee, turning over emails to this committee, acknowledging that there was a window of time at transition where she used private email for business that may have been public, why are we asking for emails from January of 17 to present? When she's acknowledged to this committee, and we've had a window of time where she said she's got some emails on her private servers and turning that over, it is clear that this is a fishing expedition. And not because it's the daughter of the president. It could be any member of the White House, related to the president or not. But we're engaged in this open-ended inquiry, right? I mean, where is the probable cause here? Where is the reasonable suspicion here about what kind of wrongdoing was undertaken by the emails that were used if it was a Gmail account versus some sort of official account? What are we actually looking for as an oversight body?
Would the gentleman yield?
Keeping my time?
Sure. I don't know how to say this any differently. You know, we have laws. And the laws say we keep official records. I mean, come on now. We don't have, you don't have to go around probable cause. You talk about the official records. And we're not asking, by the way, for personal records. You understand that?
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, but I might, and I can yield to the distinguished ranking member in a second, but I understand that. And we should comply with the laws. My understanding is she's working to comply with the laws in response to the request from this body. My understanding is she's turning over emails in response to it and making those records public. That's what the laws are saying, to make them part of the Presidential Records Act. This is something that I think is critically important to this whole debate. Why are we doing this? Because they're working with us to comply with the law, to turn over the information, to follow what the chairman was just saying. In the meantime, while we are doing this, while we are sitting here, as I pointed out before, for the hour we're going to be debating this, another $100 million of debt's been racked up. Another how many thousands of people are poured across our border? How much more control have we yielded to cartels who truly control and run our border? That's what we're dealing about. We've got a text. I get information right here from someone on the front lines on the border saying, I will tell you, my station, this is Border Patrol, my station has around 500 total agents, around 70 for the day shift, around 90 for swings, and around 80 for midnight shift. I'm averaging between 9 to 14 on the line for day shift. They've halted the horse patrol detail and made them security at McAllen. They're making our elite and highly trained BORTAC do the same. Detention security. All the agencies that are helping us are doing detention security, hospital watch, sandwich making, handing out hygienic items, and milk and transportation. My Army unit was called up. What are we doing? We're building new detention facilities in the border. They're not patrolling the border. We're not doing anything to stop and deal with the problems that we've got with cartels managing the border. And we're sitting here in a fishing expedition for emails alleging that we're trying to do that in compliance with a law that's being complied with. In what universe is this what we're supposed to be doing for the United States of America, for the people of this country, who are watching their country racking up mountains of debt? $320 billion over existing spending levels, which would still give us $1 trillion deficit. Well done, Congress. Well done. And you're going to have that kind of level of spending while we've got wide open borders. What are we doing for the people of the United States? I'm going to be told, oh, we're protecting the law. The law is being complied with. When instead what it is a fishing expedition for political purposes, which we saw on high display yesterday in the room next door, where we got nothing other than dawdling responses about an incompetent effort. And here we sit, mounting up debt for our children and grandchildren. My 9-year-old son is in this room. We all have families. What are we passing down to them? $100 million of debt per hour? It's extraordinary. Wide open borders, destroying communities, endangering lives of Americans in South Texas while I get smirks from my Democratic colleagues, while there are people right now facing attacks from cartels, dealing with it on a daily basis, and we get smirks and we get requests for emails from people in the White House. This is the face of the Democratic Party. This is the face of your Congress today, America.
Good job, Chip. Good job.
Mr. Connolly.
I thank the chair.
Ms. Connolly.
I thank the chair. I have a motion. I do want to just say, shame on my colleague from Texas.
No.
To question the motivation of Democrats.
Shame on this body.
Yeah, I know. We've heard from you. It's my time. It's
And
my,
you'll continue to hear from me
Wait a
in
minute.
defense of this country.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold up. He has the time.
I have the time.
America deserves the time.
Yeah. America deserves better than what I just heard from, Mr. Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Taking his ball and going home. Bye.
Recognized for the time.
Mr. Chairman, I move the previous question on the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
The question is on ordering the previous question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the previous question is ordered on the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
The previous question is ordered.
We want a roll call on the
Okay.
second,
Uh,
when the official passage.
On the official passage, okay, the previous question is ordered.
Okay, move. The previous question having been ordered on the amendment in the nature of a substitute, the vote now occurs on agreeing to the amendment as amended, and all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
We'll take a roll call now.
We will.
Not yet, that's ANS, just this is final passage.
No, I thought we already. Oh,
That
no,
was
that's
previous
right. That was
question,
previous
final-
question.
yeah, okay,
We'll
sorry.
wait for the roll call on the final. Yeah.
The vote now occurs on approving the resolution as amended by the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the resolution as amended is agreed to. There's a request for roll call. The clerk will call the roll.
Chairman Cummings?
Aye.
Chairman Cummings votes aye. Ms. Maloney?
Aye.
Ms. Maloney votes aye. Ms. Norton?
Aye.
Ms. Norton votes aye. Mr. Clay? Mr. Lynch? Aye. Mr. Lynch votes aye. Mr. Cooper? Aye. Mr. Cooper votes aye. Mr. Connolly?
Aye.
Mr. Connolly votes aye. Mr. Krishnamurthy? Mr. Krishnamurthy votes aye. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Mr. Ruda? Mr. Ruda votes aye. Ms. Hill? Ms. Hill votes aye. Ms. Wasserman Schultz? Ms. Wasserman Schultz votes aye. Mr. Sarbanes? Mr. Sarbanes votes aye. Mr. Welch? Mr. Welch votes aye. Ms. Spear? Ms. Spear votes aye. Ms. Kelly? Ms. Kelly votes aye. Mr. DeSaulnier? Mr. DeSaulnier votes aye.
Voting
Ms.
for my
Lawrence?
country, aye.
Ms. Lawrence votes aye. Ms. Plaskett? Mr. Khanna? Mr. Khanna votes aye. Mr. Gomez? Mr. Gomez votes aye. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez? Ms. Ocasio-Cortez votes aye. Ms. Presley? Ms. Presley votes aye. Ms. Tlaib? Ms. Tlaib votes aye. Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Gosar? Ms. Fox? Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey votes no. Mr. Meadows? Mr. Heiss? Mr. Heiss votes no. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman votes no. Mr. Comer? Mr. Comer votes no. Mr. Cloud? Mr. Gibbs? Mr. Gibbs votes no. Mr. Higgins? Mr. Higgins votes no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Norman votes no. Mr. Roy? Mr. Roy votes no. Ms. Miller? Ms. Miller votes no. Mr. Green? Mr. Green votes no. Mr. Armstrong? Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe? Mr. Stubbe votes no. Mr. Keller? Mr. Keller votes no.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Am I recorded?
Mr. Clay is not recorded.
Mr. Clay votes aye.
How is Mr.
Mr. Clay,
No, go ahead, please.
Mr. Clay votes aye.
How is Mr. Gosar recorded?
Mr. Gosar is not recorded. No. Mr. Gosar votes no.
And how is Ms. Fox recorded?
Ms. Fox is not recorded. No. Ms. Fox votes no.
Has everyone voted? The clerk will give us the tally.
On this vote, we have 23 ayes and 16 noes.
On this vote, there were 23 ayes and 16 noes. The resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Staff is authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. I want to thank the committee for a good discussion, for a good discussion, and I really appreciate it. And now,
The committee is adjourned. Have a pleasant recess.
the committee is adjourned. Thank you. And have a good recess.